you got 21 strategies. How do you allocate to them? Is like 121 and 121st in each, or how do you think about it?
Like mostly. So I would say like we start with that because like, look, if something back tests, like they all back test about as good as a C tier, like a sharper one roughly, or a bit better. You know, but then you take into account like if there's any kind of big turnover differences, if there's any breadth differences, like most of them play all the assets. What happens if one of them is commodity only, and you take that into consideration. Yeah, I think I would say like ultimately like turnover and breadth are the two that kind of make you pull back on some that aren't as good. A couple of them correlate with each other at like a 0.2 or 0.3, which bugs me because like anything above that, I'll say it's one thing. Throw them together. You know, 2 or 3 0.2s. This is a you know, this is like once again the correlation thing. It's like, you know, how many 0.2s before they're not independent and you've actually got, you know, the answer is like it's a 0.3 and like suddenly like 3 become 2. But at the end of the day, like there's a couple and the bigger challenge is not like the signals themselves, you know, you can run independently, but they're not independent things. They're not like, hey, here's 20 managers doing their own thing. What they are is 20 sets of inputs into what do I want to do with the S&P today, right? And so so at any given point in time, like your signal in the S&P is absolutely continuous. It's rising and it's falling as these things are saying I want more or less, and they're voting. And then you've got other things coming into account, like which is your vol targeting, your beta neutralization, like all of those pieces, all the different betas that you have in there, like are also adjusting your S&P. So all that's working together. When you say with these guys, like if you let them run as independents, like the real risk is that even if they're on average independent, every now and then, like 3 or 4 of them will be like all leaning the same way, or 6 or 7 leaning the same way. And suddenly you go like, at my portfolio level, I want 20 independent bets. I don't want one concentrated short bond bet or long equity bet or short trend following bet, like because that like I want 20 independent things, not one thing. And so like the key, like and I think like the secret sauce and probably the most important feature is like, how do I respond to that without destroying the alpha signal, which is like when you want more of that thing, you want more of that thing. But at what point does it become too much of that thing, and you have to start pulling back on it because it becomes a contagion? Like there's a cancer, and you want to kill it out. And so the portfolio construction and risk and beta neutralization is everything, I would say. Or it's so much of it.
You're beta neutralizing risk parity, beta, and trend following beta, right? I'm sorry, I just got a comment for somebody.
I am beta neutralizing naturally by signal generation. You do your absolute best to make the thing beta neutral when you generate. Like so you say when you build a model, you want to make sure that the signals themselves on average like are 0. Like and so like you know it's like my equity on average is 0, my bonds on average, and every single asset on average is 0. But even then, that doesn't get you beta neutral necessarily, because you might be long and high vol and short and lower vol regimes. Like you might end up with some residual beta, but you do your best at the signal generation piece, and you do their best at like for all the betas at the signal generation piece. And then you look at like all of those guys together, and you go, now what is my residual beta that's left over? Because there's always some beta left over. Like when we were doing equity quant at Teachers, we built like to the best of our ability beta neutral quant. You go, how do you do it? It's like, well, if I have a Canadian, you know, quant factor, I would beta neutralize to the Canadian market. Right, okay, that's alpha. It's uncorrelated to the Canadian market. But if I check that alpha and check its correlation to like other markets, like I would 40% correlate to the S&P 500 and 20% correlate to the FTSE. It's like, well, why? Because the Canadian market is itself like completely concentrated in like idiosyncratic thing. And so you go, I got to beta neutralize to everything. And then you go like, and the same thing if I beta neutralize S&P 500 to S&P 500, I still might have some correlation to like, and so like betas, like they stick around. And so you've got to like, you handle them where you can, and then you look at the entire system and you handle them again. And then you can handle them in lots of different ways, right? You can handle them, you know, backwards looking or forwards looking, and like different levels of responsiveness, and a lot of that has to do with like, am I leaning against the signal, or am I trying to demean a long thing, or am I trying to lean against when it gets too big? And like I said, there's some art and science to it all. But at the end of the day, the real goal is to try and be as uncorrelated as possible to everything, while still, Corey, having your positive returns, obviously, because without the positive returns, I would say the lack of correlation is less than useful.